Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Your Marketing Event, One Size Doesn't Fit All. I would now like to introduce our presenters from Glenn Devens. Steve Wujcik, who is the Director of Public Relations with Glenn Devens. And Steve uses his nearly 25 years of communication experience to lead and direct clients' earned and owned content strategies. His passion for senior living industry is driven by helping clients define and explore communication approaches that align with the community's purpose and activating those ideas to improve reputation and overcome awareness challenges. He calls it PR with purpose, not PR for impressions. And joining Steve is Dave Dunn, Associate Director of Public Relations with Glenn Devens. Dave thrives on storytelling, content marketing, writing, video production, and integrated communication plans to successfully position clients in the public eye. His background includes more than a decade working in the media as a television news reporter, where he won multiple broadcast journalism awards. Dave's media experience also provided him vast knowledge of communication strategies in the public and private sector, including politics, government, education, health, entertainment, retail, restaurants, charitable organizations, and more. So join me in welcoming Steve and Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to sit through what we feel is going to be an insightful presentation on event marketing and some things that you should consider when hosting an event. My name is Steve Wujcik. I'm Director of Public Relations at Glenn Devens.
And I'm Dave Dunn, the Associate Director of Public Relations, and we're happy to be here.
Want to be mindful of everyone's time, so we're just going to jump straight into some of the key takeaways that we want you to have from today's presentation. Obviously, you promote your community's features, your benefits, your amenities, your culture. You market those to your audiences, but what else can you do as a value add to attract people to your community? So, one of the first key takeaways that we want you to take from today's presentation is, why are events important? Secondly, lead nurturing versus event planning. Just don't think of it as a one-time activity. How can that event help move that lead along through the sales process? And finally, one size doesn't fit all. Make sure the topic aligns with your audience and appeals to their current emotional state. It aligns with your culture and not your competition. So why events? And obviously, one of the most important things is it's a great opportunity for your residents, your prospective residents, to feel, see, experience your lifestyle, your culture. What makes you different and special as opposed to your competition. Secondly, why are events important? They break down those stereotypes of that some people have if they haven't experienced a senior living community, of that it's cold, it's institutional, versus a vibrant, active playground, so to speak, for seniors. Thirdly here, events showcase your culture, your strengths, your amenities, the things that make your place special and unique, and really give you an opportunity to demonstrate what you stand for and what you believe in. And then finally here, and probably more important for all of us, is it shortens the sales cycle. The sooner they experience what you have to offer, the shorter the sales journey becomes. Ultimately, really what we want for them to walk away from after holding an event on your community is for them to say something along the lines of, this place feels like me. I can see myself or my loved one living here. So that's all great, right? We can showcase the experience of the community and the culture, but ultimately we're all held accountable for demonstrating that return on investment of your time, of your money, of your effort to put on and host an event. So how has it improved the quality of leads? Are they moving along in that sales process from someone who doesn't really know much about your community to someone who is very close to saying yes. So driving occupancy is the #1 goal, for your event. So first, before you start here, the key thing is thinking about your invite list. It's very important to start with a smart, targeted list. Think about quality of your invitees as opposed to the quantity. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Sometimes you do want a larger event, and sometimes smaller events are more important based upon maybe the topic or what you want to say or what you want to appeal to this prospective audience. You may want to segment that by lead score. Are they hot leads, or again, are they don't know much about your community? So really think about your invite list, segment that. Sometimes you may want to, you have a good topic that appeals to like-minded audience. Maybe they're really interested in learning more about the life care and what that means. And life care can be complicated and complex to people who aren't all that familiar with it. So, hosting an event about the financial 101s of life care and really get into a very tight, targeted list because these people might be interested in life care.
And we're going to talk about some of the touch points that you want to establish throughout this process, and why those are important, because one thing you want to do is identify and try to weed out some of those people who may just be coming for some free food or some sort of the speaker or the entertainment. Sort of like those nosy neighbors. Odds are you're going to have some no matter what at your event, but you want to work to know who they are so you can focus your attention on those hotter leads. One of the benchmarks that we really like to look at when it comes to event planning and the sales cycle is benchmark is out of every 100 leads or people who attend an event, you should expect about 10 appointments out of those, and eventually 1 to 5 residents, people who are going to say yes, to moving in. And in total, we find that it takes about 7 to 10 touch points, throughout the process and throughout the process of an event before that prospective resident makes the decision to say yes.
So what are some of those touch points that you need to be thinking about? It's important to think about before the event and after the event, and not just the event that takes place within that 1 to 2 hour window at your community. So when you think about before the event, are you sending a thank you after they have RSVP'd? Are you sending a reminder or a confirmation along the way? And then, Dave, how are you communicating with them at the event? They're not just showing up on your community and sitting down and waiting for the presenter to talk about the specific topic.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's maximizing your time there. It's not just coming in and getting a show and then they walk out and leave. There's a number of things to think about. And maybe it's even at the event, looking to create additional opportunities or additional touch points after the event. For example, if a speaker does a presentation, have a photo opportunity for the attendees with the speaker. Then to get that photo, the prospect has to come back to the community, or you email it to them, or have some other touch point to further the relationship. So, be thinking about those different things during the event, and then of course post.
Yeah, and then after the event, a couple of good ideas here. Ask them to go on Facebook or Yelp or Google or Caring.com and to rate that event experience. Give it a star rating. Give us a comment. What did you think? What would you like? What did you like about the event? Is there another topic that you might be interested in as well? Another thing to consider as well is doing a follow-up survey, whether that's through snail mail or email. Again, ask some smart but pointed questions. How did they like it? What did they like about it? And what would they like to hear from us in the future?
Yeah, what other interests might they have? Of course, that's in addition to a post-event thank you note for them attending, and in the right situation, schedule a personal one-on-one visit.
So, Andrea, at this time, I know we would like to administer the first 2 polls that we have set up here that really talk about what we'll be referencing on the following slides about appealing and connecting to your audiences. So.
Okay, great. Well, our first poll question is, select the top 3 event topics you believe have the most appeal for your audiences. And please jump in. You can select one or more of the following: art or performing arts, books and authors, travel, money, financial planning, wellness, and food. So take a minute and go ahead and select your choices. Steve, is there better topics for different lifestyles, say for IL, AL, or memory care?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there better topics for events depending on the different lifestyle? If it's, independent living or assisted living?
I think maybe when you think about assisted living and you think about the dimensions of wellness, and we'll get into that, and depending upon the life stage that the person is in, there might be some, at the assisted living side of life where those dimensions of wellness are more important. So think about maybe looking at topics around physical fitness or spirituality or social. Those are some things, and I know that's the next poll that we'll talk about. But those type of topics might be better suited for AL. IL could be a whole host of things. I mean, those people tend to be a little more active and get outside of the community a little bit more. So maybe it's travel or tourism or something.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit on what your community is known for. I mean, are you a community located near a university where you have a lot of academics there and lifelong learning is a big focus? Or is your community a little bit more artsy? And trying to find something that really fits what your community, what that culture is about. In general, we do a lot more work for event planning for independent living communities to attract people and create that demand. I mean, of course, the assisted living and beyond sides are a little bit more needs based. So our experience lies more on the independent living side.
Great. Well, we've got everybody's results in, and so number 1 was at 92% with wellness, has the top event topic. Number 2 was food at 68%. I think that's everybody's favorite. Tied with art or performing arts, books and authors. And number 3 was at 56%, money and financial planning.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
And drilling down on that number, what appeared to be the number 1 response from people, that wellness. I mean, I think that
we go ahead and administer that second poll there, Andrea, that talks about wellness.
Yeah, so I've just gone ahead and launched the second poll. Select the top 2 wellness topics you believe have the most appeal for your audience. And your choices are physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, or social. And, quick question, Steve and Dave, are wellness topics also good for professional networking events?
And that would be in trying to network with I was doing discharge planners, or what sort of?
Yeah, so like discharge planners and local community healthcare professionals.
I think there's opportunity for that. I mean, typically we are, we're tasked with mainly, consumer-facing types of events, and that's really where our experience lies. But I mean, I think there's opportunity for that.
Yeah, I think if there's a local hospital nearby where you've got a strong relationship with partnerships, moving patients from one place to the other, trying to establish appeal or a connection or a relationship with the staff there at the hospital, it certainly could be an opportunity to consider.
Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and share the results from the second poll. Number 1 at 86% was physical. Number 2 was emotional at 41%. And then tied for third place, both at 32%, was intellectual and social, with the last being spiritual at 23%.
Interesting. The physical fitness.
It's not a surprise, really. Tends to be a frequent topic that we hear about and help with at the community level.
And as you're weighing this out, from that first poll, talking about, some more lifestyle type topics, to the second poll, some of the more, senior living related, the health and wellness topics. When you're trying to think about, planning this event and what sort of topic, you really want to appeal and connect. That's what you want to do. And first thing is determining a goal. Is it a lead generating event for first time visitors? In other words, is your list of leads low? Do you need to build that list to just get some new leads on there? These typically should be, larger events that have a broader appeal. More often than not, more of a lifestyle event. Or is your goal, is it a conversion event that's designed to move existing leads closer to a decision? You have a good list already and you just need to move some of them along. These events typically should be smaller, more intimate, involve residents and firsthand perspective. Often these events are when it's more advantageous to drive home some of those more wellness topics and what sort of benefit that community can really provide.
Think about how you can establish value with your audiences who are joining you on your community. Engaging. Does it appeal to their emotions? Does it appeal to their current mindset? Does it appeal to their current interests? We talk about arts, travel, fitness, food, authors, money, dimensions of wellness, the health aspects. Pick a topic that is highly relevant to your particular situation or particular time. We've got a good client of ours, Friendship Village Tempe, which is outside of Phoenix. One of the things that you need to consider too, before I get to this example here, is, what does your community stand for? What does your community believe in? And we have this community in Tempe here, where one of the things that they believe in is open arms. They're very inclusive. They're very accepting of differences. They're a very social sort of culture and environment. So, one of the things that we planned for the community recently was bringing in the Navajo Nation to talk about, their heritage, their history, the arts of the Navajo. And it turned out to be a very successful event. So, tying into the topic, into what the culture is and what they believe in at the community is going to be it at least demonstrates to your audience what you believe in. And if they believe in what you believe in, then you have a more engaged prospect that will likely lead to a greater opportunity for follow through on the sale.
Talking about some of the logistics on the specific day of the event and ways to really maximize the reach there, we put two up because we strongly recommend and have found the greatest success by having two events on the same day, two events with the same speaker. One event for the leads and prospects, one event for residents and friends. Oftentimes communities can find that maybe they just don't have the physical space to be able to combine everyone together. Maybe it's not the right situation to combine residents with, visitors. But the bottom line is, residents often like to feel included or they're interested in attending the event. And, it can be tough to combine them. Most speakers that we, have found are open to doing a second presentation on that same day for minimal or sometimes even no additional cost. You're able to get more bang for your buck. 10 a.m., 2 p.m. are the times we, recommend, and it's a good way to give value to both audiences. And ultimately, you want residents to be good ambassadors of your community.
Yeah, you engage your residents with a separate event like that. They are more appreciative of the community, and then ultimately what that is going to lead to is improvement in resident satisfaction. So it's just one small thing that you can do to just help the residents overall. And before we get into a couple of items here when you're thinking about having a guest speaker at the event, Andrea, if we could go ahead and administer our third and final poll.
Sure. So our last poll, the question is, what do you typically spend for a guest speaker for your event? Please select one of the following: 0 to 500, 500 to 2,000, 2,000 to 5,000, or more than 5,000. And a question for you, is there a typical number of events you should have per year to drive leads?
That's a really tough question. There's a lot of factors that go into trying to determine that. So, what is your overall marketing mix? How are you sending messages either through advertising, direct mail, through public relations, media relations, social media? So when you look at your overall marketing communication mix and how many times you're touching them or you're hitting them is one thing you have to consider. The other thing to consider too is, how big do you want your lead base to be? How frequently do you want to hit that lead base? So if you have a large lead base, obviously it gives you the flexibility to do more events. If your lead base is relatively smaller because your occupancy is at a good level, then maybe fewer events. Or as Dave and I mentioned earlier, maybe you look at that lead base and you go high and targeted to the ones that are closer to the final sale.
Yeah, some general benchmarks, maybe about one per quarter. You don't want to overwhelm yourself and just from the logistics, because you want to put a lot of thought and planning into these and not have so much that you just aren't able to put that full effort into it. Of course, there's times of years, events that are held, if you're in a cold weather climate, you really want to stay away from those winters. It's just really tough to get people out. Hot summers want to stay away from. Spring and fall are great times, but in general, about one per quarter that you really put some effort into and to maximize it.
Great. Oh, that's good information. So we have the results, and this one, 96% typically spend 0 to 500 on a guest speaker, and only 4% spend about 500 to 2,000.
Yeah. Not too surprising here. We all know that budgets are tight, and we have to be really smart and responsible with what we do with our sales and marketing dollars to help that sales process. So not too surprising there.
And as we'll talk about a little bit more, it's not all about the money. You don't need to be in that high category. We'll talk about that later. What's more important is finding the right types of speaker.
Yeah, so, when you're thinking about and evaluating the speaker, and not every event you don't have to have a guest speaker, but certainly it makes a stronger appeal to those outside audiences if you do. But, a couple things to consider here when evaluating them is, are they familiar with senior living? Have they spoken to seniors before? And then once you get to them to agree to making a presentation on your community, are they willing, as we mentioned earlier, are they willing to mingle with your audience? Will they do a Q&A afterwards? Or maybe even a get together with a small VIP group that you feel is really important in nurturing as a lead?
Some way that they'll add a personal touch and add value. We find most speakers are willing to do this, beyond just, sticking around for that, 30 or 45 or hour presentation. To do that little extra to make, the attendees feel valued.
Treat it almost like an interview process for a job candidate and ask for certain references and make sure you talk to those references. If they've talked to a senior living community somewhere else across the country, reach out to that executive director or that events coordinator and just talk to them. What did you think about her presentation in appealing to your senior audiences? So it's, seeking references is a key part of that as well. So, and then lastly here, before we kind of wrap up our presentation here, we're going to get into a few tips here in a moment. But, what are you doing to promote your events? Some things to consider. Obviously, direct mail invitations to get people onto your community is the most popular and most effective. But a couple things to think about is that we find very effective is, are you promoting your events on your website? And not only promoting, but then do you have the ability to set up a registration system on your website to make it very seamless and easy for the prospects to RSVP? Are you sending email, as we mentioned earlier? Are you sending email invitations before, during, and after the event? Promotion of the event doesn't just happen before. Like we mentioned earlier, think about after the event and what you can do for that as well.
Of course, another growing promotional channel is on social media. I think, a lot of communities, majority these days, at least have a Facebook page. You're able to create an event on that Facebook page where you can send it out to your followers or even friends of your followers and be able to get people checking yes, they will be attending the event. So we're seeing more of that and encouraging it, and people are seeing more value in that. But, again, direct mail invites, bread and butter, but some, growing influence in some of these other promotional channels.
The last thing to consider here is kind of traditional media relations, reaching out to the reporters within your city or community and seeing if they would have interest in attending the event. It's really not pre-promotion from a media relations standpoint. It's like if you have a very interesting, compelling speaker or topic that is occurring at your event, invite the media to attend it. And what you'll get more times than not is a follow-up story from the reporter saying that they attended this event at Community XYZ and they got to listen to this speaker and she was so compelling, and they will give you kind of that post-promotion of your event just to extend the life of that event. Again, you want to get the most bang for your buck, the best ROI that you can. It's not just about that 1, 2, 3 hour window when you're having that event on your community. What can you do before and what can you do after? So just some final tips here. We've kind of segmented these into 2 different categories. One, tips for thinking about what we talked about earlier from a speaker standpoint. As Dave mentioned, the higher the price tag for the speaker fee doesn't always equate to the best value.
We have some examples where there's some communities who really wanted to splurge, or really wanted to go for a big event, and it spent anywhere from $10,000 on a speaker, $20,000 to $30,000. Those speakers do generate, a larger attendee list, but it doesn't quantify to the price that they pay. For they don't get 10 times the amount of attendees or leads, although they're paying 10 times the price. You do get more, but it just typically doesn't, equivalent the same. So the more you spend doesn't mean the higher quality.
Review the message. What is the topic that the speaker is going to be talking about? Go to the speaker's website. Check YouTube for previous presentations. And be sure when you're watching those presentations, you're watching it through the resident's eyes, the prospective resident's eyes, and not your eyes as an employee, as a team member of the community. So put yourself in the resident's shoes as you're watching that presentation, and that will help determine whether or not this speaker is really the compelling person that you think he or she is. And then finally, scheduling expectations. Some speakers, depending on how frequently they are out there in the marketplace, you're going to have to plan 4 or 5 months in advance to secure that person. And what if that person isn't available? So your top choice can't join you on your community 4 or 5 months from now. So make sure that you plan ahead. You come up with a short list of speakers or topics that you want to have. But there is a lot of pre-planning that you have to consider. Unless you have a really strong relationship with a local professor who you can call up on a whim and say, hey, can you come to our community next month and talk about X, Y, and Z? But in most cases, the speakers that are out there talking about a variety of different things and have busy schedules, you're going to need to plan a little bit farther in advance. And then also consider, does their travel, are those travel expenses wrapped into their overall fee as well? So when it comes to, event tips, have a backup plan. I mean, recently we coordinated an event for a community, and 2 months prior to the event, or 2 weeks prior to the event, we got the unfortunate notice that she had to go into the hospital for a health related issue, and we had to postpone it. So, you know, thankfully we had some ideas kind of in the can as to what happens when we do have to cancel an event for a client. So what is your backup plan?
Is there something you can substitute it, or do you need to postpone it to a later time? I mean, you know, so you don't, if you already have invitations out there and people planning to come, if they don't just come, you don't have anything really waiting for them. And
you know, the second thing here is, you know, plan for tours. You know, again, think beyond the actual presentation. You've got a good captive audience on your community. You know, what are you doing to take them out of that ballroom or that area where you're having that presentation and getting them out to see, experience your community? And then finally, you know, give them something.
Yeah, we find a lot of people, you know, some of these speakers, maybe it's somebody who has, you know, authored, you know, some sort of book. Well, they'll often like to bring, you know, copies of that book, and they'll have a book signing afterward and leave residents. You know, for a very minimal fee, you can purchase a box of books, and you know, the prospective resident can leave with the book. I mean, you know, if it's a you know, presenter talking about life care, or you know, the dollars and cents of senior living. I mean, maybe it's some sort of, you know, branded calculator or an umbrella. You know, something that they, you know, older adults like to really hang on to stuff. I mean, they love freebies, and that's something that will sit in their house and be a reminder of your community and your brand.
So with that, I know we're right about at the half-hour time period, so we just would like to open it up to any questions, and we're happy to take some time to provide some answers for you.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, Steve and Dave. Just a reminder, you can still submit questions to the questions pane in your attendee control panel. And we've got a few questions here for you. The first one is, can you give us some ideas of events you've had in communities you've worked with that were a success? And it's from Heather, and she's looking for some specific examples.
Yeah, you know, again, it's you know, whether it's senior living topics or more of those lifestyle topics. I mean, if it's a lead generating event, you know, one that always seems to have a lot of popularity is, you know, an antique appraiser coming to an event, you know, and you can get some of those guys who actually appear on Antique Roadshow, who you invite people to bring one item, you know, one item of theirs, a personal belonging, where they can bring it in, and it's incredible how these appraisers are able to look at something and be able to give the history on this and an approximate value of it. They'll go around the room and you know, they have a, you know, process line where somebody will show them that and they'll talk about it. You know, wine tastings, beer tastings with local vineyards and local breweries are big. Of course, you want it to, you know, fit with your culture. If you're a community that doesn't serve, you know, beer or wine at your dining venues, and that you know, steer away from that. Local musicians are big. Local authors. Putting on fashion shows, and you know, working with a you know, clothing store like Chico's. Something we'll often do. Well, they will supply some clothes. The resident will model the clothes for the attendees who are there. Local chef demonstrations and tastings are always big. You know, there's quite a variety, and of course, singing groups. Always tend to have a good deal of success and churn out.
Great, those are some great ideas. Another question, and this is always a big one, I know, for operators. Do we always have to provide food for events?
Yeah, Dave and I actually talked about that as we were thinking about the presentation and some ideas here. And
yeah,
no.
It doesn't have to be a full-on lunch. You don't need to have a full, you know, course meal with every type of event. And more often than not, I mean, we don't. Now, we do recommend it, and most will have some sort of, you know, refreshments or some sort of, you know, like hors d'oeuvres, or, you know, some sort of way to sample, you know, and just maybe a small size, you know, way to sample the type of dining that, you know, you're going to be featuring at the small taste. But I mean, you don't need to invest the time in full sit-down meals.
Great. That's good to know. Another question that came through, what time of day is most successful to hold an event?
Yeah, anytime. No, just joking. Yeah. Typically, I think Dave mentioned earlier in the presentation, having an event sometime between 10 and 2 o'clock tends to be the most successful. It's tougher to get this group out and about earlier in the morning, and then by the afternoon rolls around, they start settling into their routine. So it seems like they're more willing to get out of their apartment, get out of their living situation, and explore sometime around the 10 to 2 time period.
If you have it around the lunch hour, I mean, then they're going to, somewhat expect, they're very routine type people. They're going to expect some type of meal with it. Or, if you have it too close to the lunch hour, then maybe you prompt to leave, and you don't have a lunch plan with this event, they may be prompt to leave pretty quickly because they're ready to go get lunch or they're ready to do something. So mid-morning, mid-afternoon are typical recommendations.
Great. And one last question we have, do you always have to pay for a guest speaker to present at your event?
I know the overwhelming answer in the poll was, smaller budgets. And most of the speakers, the short answer is no, you don't have to. But, more often than not, there is a small fee that we have with speakers that's, maybe just an honorarium, a contribution to some sort of, organization that they're a part of, or if it's a university speaker. But, oftentimes, $250, $500 are, price tag that it sounded like for most people were in that budget range. But those ones that you want to, plan out and really make the most use of.
And if you're looking at ways to maybe help negotiate and reduce those fees, think about things that you could give the speaker in return. So, are there things, can you promote the speaker on your own website to appeal to the audiences who are visiting your site? That will give that person some value. The other thing to think about too is could you provide some testimonials back to the speaker to where they could use your testimonials on his or her website to promote their brand as well. So just a couple small things to think about when you are negotiating speaker fees to help try to reduce those costs.
Oh, and one additional question just came in. Where can you find good speakers? Where do you source them?
It could come from just, a simple brainstorming of, and Google searching. Depending on, what sort of aspect of your culture, your community that, you're interested in showing off, and then, digging into research and potential options. There's certainly speaker bureaus that are out there that will schedule, those are typically going to be, at least the speakers who are $2,500 or more. They will coordinate it all for you and, have a whole book of options to pick from. But, if you're looking in that smaller amount, that, $250 to $500, there can be a variety of ways.
Or, the other thing to think about too is what are the interesting things that are within the footprint of your community, within the city. So let's say if you are tied closely to a university, there's a whole host of professors there on the campus at that university that are probably more than willing to come to your community and talk about their subject matter of expertise. Do you have a local museum or something to where, the curator or somebody from the museum could come and talk about, what they are offering the community. So think outside of the walls of your community. What is interesting within your market, within your city, that you might want to bring onto your campus, and just go out there and talk to the people at wherever that institution is, and see if they'd be willing to come and talk to your prospects and residents.
Yeah, don't be afraid to make that ask. People are much more receptive to, coming and speaking in front of a crowd than you might think. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask.
Terrific. And that's it for the questions. Thank you, Stephen and Dave, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on our presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within about 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Senior Living Smart and Stephen and Dave from Glenn Devens, we thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. For more information on managing your marketing events and other great resources for senior living operators, check out www.seniorliving.com. We're Senior Living Smart.